Hi, everybody. I'm Donna Anderson, author of Lovefraud.com. And once again, I'm with my friend and colleague, Dr. Liane Leedom. Dr. Leedom is a professor of counseling and psychology at the University of Bridgeport. And she's going to be presenting a fabulous webinar, series of webinars for survivors called Skills Training for Recovery from Abuse, Gaslighting, and Toxic Stress. So welcome, Dr. Leedom. So good to see you again.
You too, always.
Okay. So the first part one of the program, the actual program, is called Mindfulness to Clear Your Head of Sociopathic Gaslighting. Now, you've told me that mindfulness offers the possibility of true recovery from abuse and trauma suffered because of the sociopath or psychopath or narcissist, the disordered person. So, why do you say that?
Oh, because there's overwhelming evidence that all the treatments that we have for people that have been traumatized involve an element of mindfulness. And so we can either do mindfulness the long way, which is what they used to do when you'd have to go to psychoanalysis and be on the couch for every day for a week or whatever, for every day of the week for years. Or we can just teach mindfulness skills and give people the same skills quickly. Um, and so, you know, we say quickly, but mindfulness is really something people are going to have to practice in order to really get it as part of their recovery. So I say it works because there's not just my own experience, but also overwhelming evidence from clinical studies that this is how people recover from trauma.
So, what exactly is mindfulness?
Mindfulness is about paying attention to what's going on around you, tuning in to your senses. And so I'm going to use the word ancient wisdom to talk about the fact that this psychology of the mind is more than 2,500 years old, and there's a lot of information that we can get from ancient wisdom that has been supported by science. Only the ancients explain it really well. So much, instead of reading a scientific paper, you could just read the ancient wisdom. It's a little bit clearer. So ancient wisdom says that we have kind of six senses. We have our five senses, and then we have mind sense. And so mindfulness is about knowing the difference between each of the six, especially the first five versus the mind sense. Our minds are constantly going, and we're constantly in a narrative, and our self is constantly in that narrative. And so mindfulness is about stepping back from that self narrative and becoming aware of what's going on and learning over time to view that self narrative with some skepticism and to detach from it.
So, mindfulness means observing what's around, and what else?
Well, and so there's a and there is there's an attitude of acceptance without judgment. And as I was saying in our last discussion, that often what gets in the way most of people fully understanding or fully comprehending or taking in reality is their negative emotions. And so mindfulness is about stepping back and not judging experience and not seeing everything through the window of that negativity.
But it also means observing everything, including what's going on outside and within you. Is that correct?
Right, right. All those six senses. The five
Okay.
senses plus the mind sense.
Okay. All right. So, talk a little bit about this particular program in which you're going to be teaching mindfulness. What will people learn?
Well, people will learn mindfulness skills, and importantly, they will get a whole bunch of ideas about how to practice mindfulness. And and that's important because not every way of practicing suits every person. So we're going to have to introduce people to enough methods of practice so that people can find the ones that work best for themselves. So that, that takes time, to go through those different skills and to give people choices about how to practice.
Okay.
And this is recovery. We're talking about learning skills. And so just like playing a musical instrument, recovery takes practice. We're practicing these skills so that over time, this ability to be present and to see reality without that poison that's been injected by that disordered person.
So, is this kind of a different approach for people? I'm wondering if people tend to think that recovery just, you go take a pill, or you talk to a therapist or something, and it will all get better. I mean, are we instructing people in understanding that there's personal effort involved in actually doing the recovery work?
Yes. And it's funny because I was just studying this today, in fact. Um, not exactly um, trauma, but in clinical trials, gave people medication for depression and anxiety, and then randomized them, over a period of time, and people got better. And then they randomized them to mindfulness treatment versus, a placebo, listening to stretching or something like that. Um, and what they found out is that people who learn mindfulness sustain their recovery over time. And then they actually know a great deal about what the mechanism is through which mindfulness works. And I can talk about that in a second. But they look to see if that mechanism was operative even before, in terms of their initial recovery. Like, does medication work through the same way mindfulness works? And the answer is no.
Oh.
So what the data suggest is that we have levels at which we can deal with negative emotions. The first level, which is what mindfulness and also exercise do, is, did I say mindfulness? I didn't mean that. So the first level that medication and exercise tackle is just lowering the intensity. So this sense people have of, oh, all the medication does is numb me. Well, there might be a bit of truth to that. That,
Hmm.
not that that's bad. I mean, I'm a prescriber of medication myself, but the medication will lower the intensity of emotion that a person feels. Um, but mindfulness allows a person to learn to deal with negative emotion and learn to and also will decrease negative emotion over time. As people allow themselves to experience it, they actually get used to it. And then when you get used to something, it goes away. Just like, think about it like this. If you were afraid of spiders, but you were gonna, if you forced yourself to first, have a spider in a jar in front of you, and then maybe eventually, if it wasn't gonna bite or whatever, you could let it crawl on you, and you'd get used to that. So mindfulness is about letting that spider crawl on you and you don't react. And the more you do that, then hey, I'm not afraid of spiders anymore. So the negative emotion goes away versus I guess you could take Valium and then the spider wouldn't bother you either, right? Because you just biochemically or neurochemically took away your ability to be afraid. So what mindfulness does is it teaches people how to stand back and observe themselves, maybe as another person would see them. And so instead of those thoughts and those emotions related to their victimization, like my life is over, might be one.
I'll
They
never
can,
date again.
what?
I'll never
I'll,
date
ne-
again.
I'll never date again.
Yeah.
That is seen as just a thought that the mind generated. And whereas in the beginning, that thought, I'll never date again, that me, my emotions, my consciousness is all wrapped up in that me. Mindfulness allows a person to detach from that so that they say, the thought of I'll never date again just arose in my mind. And then maybe they could even deal with that with humor.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, I think that until I decide maybe at some point I want sex again and then I'll want to date. That's a healthy defense mechanism, right? Using humor. But you can't get to that healthy laughing at yourself until you're removed enough from these thoughts and until you stop believing in them totally.
And the objective is to achieve a sense of peacefulness, I imagine. So, and how does mindfulness lead to that?
Well, if we realize that the thoughts that arise in our minds and the emotions that arise in our minds, they're information and they're good for something. I'm not saying completely ignore them because that's not healthy either. But if we can regard them in a detached way with a certain amount of skepticism, then over time with practice, we don't react to them as much anymore.
And that's where
And
peace comes from.
that leads to peace
Okay.
and also happiness.
Okay. Great. All right. Well, this is going to be such a wonderful program. I'm so looking forward to it. And thank you so much, Dr. Leedom, for explaining what people will be able to learn during this upcoming session.
Great. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing everyone there.